Bring Back Nuclear, Navigating World War III, Battlefield Technologies, and How's Your Sex Life? Do you want Peter Thiel in it? Like up in the back of it? Other talks include Build a Cult, moderated by the founder of the Christian networking site Pray.com, and Build a Party, run by a former White House national security official. That's great. We have a Peter Thiel-run secret society with sessions about building cults and building political parties. What could go wrong? Together, alongside the mundane fare of a typical thought leadership conference, the documents show an extraordinary convergence of power. The registration records list General Alexis Brinkovich, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, Europe. Peter Thiel's gay ass from the tech world in Silicon Valley founded a secret society 20 years ago that I'm sure was rinky-dink back then. It has now grown so that in 2026, the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, is attending Peter Thiel's secret society. But that's not all. He's been attending the society since 2021. Must be having a good time. The website directory names sitting Trump administration officials, 2 U.S. senators, 6 members of the PayPal mafia, a former Middle East chief of intelligence, and a sitting ambassador to the United States, along with the founders and directors of many of the country's largest surveillance, data brokerage, and advertising data companies. And a lot more people, too. We'll go over it. Those executives appear side by side with senior U.S. officials overseeing their industries. What Wired points out, and I guess the journalistic reason why Wired isn't just publishing all the names that they got, all 222 of them, they're all private citizens, it's a private event. They're not implicitly guilty in anything from attending this event, except being a fucking piece of shit. That's my opinion. But they are publishing names of sort of conflicts of interest that are attending this event. So executives of tech companies that are attending the same event, and on the same list there are regulators or government officials that are supposed to be contra to those tech executives, or military and contractors that sort of have a conflict of interest by cavorting in secret with Chatham House rules, with no phones and no media, no press. So those various pairings and conflicts that they do publish here is a bunch of executives appearing side by side with senior U.S. officials that oversee their industries. Oren Hoffman, Dialogue's chairman, founded the location data broker SafeGraph. He appears in the directory alongside Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who's gay. That's going to be a theme here. In case it's going to be a joke, and it's going to be a theme. Also, Senator Ted Cruz, who's gay, chairman of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, which oversees the Federal Trade Commission and is Data Privacy Authority. Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, who was in the news recently for being gay. I'm kidding, for doxing a 19-year-old and being a strong Jew. See our recent video about that. Obviously, he's a co-founder of Palantir. Not surprised that he's attending a Peter Thiel event. He's listed in the same society as Army Secretary Dan Driscoll and Representative Jim Himes, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, which oversees agencies Palantir contracts with. So, Palantir's there, and all the military compatriots are there. None of the individuals named in this story responded to requests for comment. Rafi Grinberg, who lists himself as Dialogue's executive director on his LinkedIn profile, and is the author of the self-help book, How to Be a Grown-Up, did not respond to a request for comment. So the registration record appears to not only show who belongs to Dialogue, but who attends. Of the 222 people that are signed up for the 2026 retreat, according to the leaked records, 87 are marked as first-time attendees. Others list history stretching back more than a decade, and a handful to the society's founding 20 years ago. So, based on what the Wired article says, I'm piecing together that Wired seems to have been leaked a complete internal document of the signups for this event. So it's not just a list of names, it's the actual sign-up forms that these people all filled out. And those sign-up forms appear to include not just their name and where they're from and what their occupation is, like why they're important, but it also includes like a bunch of questionnaires of like, how do you see the world going and what's your opinion on this and that. And they get into some of those answers here, it would seem, that are kind of fluff for the article. Some of them seem kind of interesting, kind of silly, kind of spooky. So what ties the roster together more than any other is shared preoccupation with artificial intelligence, longevity, and the near future. Seems like a nice journalistic way of saying transhumanism. A bunch of freakazoid psychos, transhumanists. Asked on a sign-up form to predict the future, registrants returned again and again to the same theme, that AI will reorder work, war, education, and belief within a few years. Several foresee mass labor displacement and a swing back towards unions and government programs. Others predict an AI winter, domestic terrorism targeting data centers, terrorism, criminal defendants choosing AI lawyers over public defenders, or religious revival provoked by the disruption. Members apparently list talents on their forms, and some of them seem to have had fun with that field, like funhouse construction, and others seem to have been a little more serious on those fields. like backcountry skiing, urban exploration, meditative and psychedelic inquiry into the nature of reality, compassion and existential dread someone brings to the conference. They apparently also give book recommendations in these applications. If you haven't figured it out by now, these elites are very eccentric, quirky. They like to sprinkle in lots of fun hobbies and side quests and funny dialogue boxes in their applications, and maybe a little gay sex on the side. This form also gathers sensitive answers, including each registrant's political leaning, which Dialogue promises will not be shared in the app or with other participants ever. Wired has regrettably decided not to include those answers. I would be curious for those private answers of these various people that they're naming that are publicly presenting one form of political leaning. Be curious if their private answers match that, but we don't know because Wired is not releasing that. The leaked registration list also names senior figures absent from the public directory of 113. Randy Kroszner, a former governor of the Federal Reserve, who now serves on the Bank of England's Financial Policy Committee, the mega bankers that rule the world. I wonder what ethnicity Randy Kroszner identifies as. So quick early life check. Brave AI says yes, Randy Kroszner is Jewish. Former governor of the Federal Reserve. Who would have guessed? Haley Hoffman, a former general counsel and acting chief of staff of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Jonathan Greenblatt, the chief executive of the ADL. Peter Gotler, the president of the Cato Institute, a very powerful think tank. Think tanks are going to be a real theme here. We might even do a side quest to remind ourselves about the sort of think tank, secret society connection, think tank government connection. The Bilderberg Group comes to mind, but also other ones like the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, obviously the World Economic Forum. Sounds like the Dialogue Society has been an underground and very powerful one of these sort of secret society think tank groups that's been kind of operating in the modern era and probably gaining a lot of power. And from the looks of it, is probably far more significant than some of these other ones at this point, but it's kind of hard to tell. Ryan Stowers, the executive director of the Charles Koch Foundation. If you know, you know. And Roger Myerson, Nobel laureate economist at the University of Chicago. It also lists a cluster of Google and Google DeepMind executives, among them Tom Liu, who leads global affairs for the company's Frontier AI division, and one working journalist, Suad Mehmet, a national security correspondent for the Washington Post. She is listed as running an event called Ulysses Book Club. So journalists, I'm under the impression, are super not allowed at this event. This Washington Post journalist must be very in the club to be trusted at this event, I would presume. The rest of the membership spans hedge fund and private equity billionaires, current and former foreign officials, network television actors, best-selling authors, and religious leaders. I believe Jake Gyllenhaal is mentioned somewhere in here, among others. One of several internal documents Dialogue left exposed on the same online database that held its registration records is a guide for event moderators, urging them to remind participants that everything is off the record, Chatham House rules, and that comments should be concise and non-obvious. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it means if you're gonna say something super sketchy, maybe say it in a subtle way so that just in case no one can quote you later as saying, "We shall take over the world." That's kind of how that sounds to me. Maybe I'm misreading it. But it also coaches them to model brief introductions to avoid status signaling in a room full of senators, dignitaries, and tycoons. Wired points out the irony that the discipline imposed by the group did not extend to its website. So this is founded by tech executive Peter Thiel. They're all about AI. These are the smartest people in the world that are going to run the world secretly in place of your elected officials, but they don't know how to build a website that's secure. And apparently pretty basic access is granted from their homepage to get all their private documentation and all of their sign-up forms, their secret members lists, and all of their secret private responses that were never going to be exposed. So that's encouraging. Maybe these people should be a little more concerned with being good at their jobs than ruling the world secretly. Not very confidence inspiring. A separate dialogue page at app.dialogue.org presents a sign-in screen for Dialogue Global 2026 outside Dublin. The page invites any visitor to sign in by email or Google account, presents no terms of service. The directory was just embedded in the code of dialogue.org on a near-empty page and was served to any visitor who viewed the page's source, so it sounds like it was relatively easy to get to. I don't know. I'm no hacker, but it doesn't sound super complicated. Dialogue has operated with very little public footprint since its founding. It holds at least one retreat a year with assigned seating, moderated sessions, and a rule that nothing said is for attribution. That's the Chatham House rule. Past gatherings have been held at Ritz-Carlton, Dove Mountain in Arizona, and San Clemente Palace in Venice, Italy. We have a little bit of information about the one in Venice, Italy. There's a small handful of articles and journalism that's been done on this that we'll briefly cover, but this Wired expose is definitely the most complete piece that we've got so far. The statistician Andrew Gelman published one of Dialogue's invitations to his blog in 2022. We'll look at that in a second. And it describes his format and a registration fee of more than $16,000, which is awfully cheap. Come on, guys. Y'all are rich. You can charge a lot more, I'm sure. The 2014 retreat drew renewed attention this year when an invitation forwarded to the financier Jeffrey Epstein surfaced in the U.S. Department of Justice's release of the Epstein files. Wired had to do a bit of retraction because they mistook a Jeff Epstein that was on a list of past participants with that Jeffrey Epstein that is a CFO at Oracle with a very unfortunate name. So just to clarify this little piece for anyone interested in this story, there is an invitation in the Epstein files that's sent to the Jeffrey Epstein. We'll look at that. But that was conflated with an actual record of an attendee named Jeff Epstein that is a different Jeff Epstein. So the Epstein was invited, but we don't know if he ever attended. The Oracle CFO, Jeff Epstein, apparently has attended in the past. Just to clarify. Here is the Epstein files version of this invitation that was sent to Jeffrey Epstein 2012, 16 months before the event. In the invitation to try to, sweeten the deal, this is just the first page of it, but they have a whole list of attendees to the 2014 event to try to, butter people up and get them to come. And we can actually look at that whole PDF here. We'll briefly scroll it, see if we see any interesting names. So this is actually the EFTA file on the justice.gov website in its original format. A couple of redactions, a couple of founders' names are redacted. For some reason, first name of Mr. Appy, professor of economics at Harvard University, is redacted. Stephen Cohen, co-founder of Palantir. Adam D'Angelo, CEO of Quora and a former CTO of Facebook. He also did a little stint on the board of OpenAI in their little transition period when everything went to shit. Here's Jeff Epstein, former CFO of Oracle. Richard Haas, the president of the Council of Foreign Relations. Speaking of think tanks and secret societies, if you know, you know. Reid Hoffman, because Reid Hoffman has to go to every single sketchy gathering on the goddamn planet. I can't believe this man still has a job. It's probably because he's never said anything offensive about a Jew. If you don't know, that's a reference to our most recent expose on the 19-year-old that decided to cancel his life because he said something offensive to a Jew. Gary Kasparov, former world chess champion. Henry Kravis, co-CEO of KKR. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. You know. Laura and Gary Lauder, general partners of Lauder Partners from the Lauder family. Think Ronald Lauder of the Estee Lauder Company. Kevin Warsh, the son-in-law of Ronald Lauder, who is now the chair of the Federal Reserve. Joe Lonsdale, the co-founder of Palantir. Some retired four-star generals in here. Chamath Palihapitiya, CEO, Social and Capital, former VP Growth, Mobile, International at Facebook. He shows up in all kinds of documentation like this. Robert Rubin, co-chairman, Council on Foreign Relations, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. Yeah, he's very tied into all of the think tanks. This is the deep state, just through and through. The corporate, the tech, the military, the governmental, they're all here. And then there's other randos. There's so many I'm skipping over, but just random things like this guy right here, Angelo Sotira, the CEO of DeviantArt, which is like an art sharing platform online for artists. Kind of weird. Obviously, Peter Thiel. Interesting. Michael Wolff, CEO of Activate, the former president and COO of MTV Networks, former partner of McKinsey, former senior partner, Booz Allen and Hamilton. Quite the resume there. And just for funsies, to cap it off, Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg, former Minister of Defense of Germany, former Minister of Economics and Technology in Germany, and then a bunch of trash. So that was the invitation sent to Jeffrey Epstein all the way back in 2012 for the 2014 event. Obviously, we don't know for sure that all those people did attend. Those were just who they were listing as attendees from that event to try to sweeten the deal. It's possible that Jeffrey Epstein did attend. We don't know. Seems probable that he would have loved to attend. Just for fun, while we're listing names, let's get into this original leaked list of names that Maya Arsen-Krimu published on Blue Sky. This is what sort of spurred Wired's expose on it. I don't know how Wired got their expose out after just one day, if they work at light speed or if they were working with Maya Krimu in the background and then they published sort of simultaneously, or what? Not really clear on that. There's not a lot of details coming out. Maybe we'll get more reporting coming soon. But Maya did publish her list of 113 names in raw form. Wired was more close to the chest with theirs, and they only published names that they sort of thought were significant for their own reasons. But I'll just scroll this list and point out a couple that stand out to me. Peter Attia, recent scandals with Peter Attia. If you know, you know. Scott Bessent is here. Cory Booker, senator from New Jersey. Scooter Braun, the CEO of Hive America, founder of Ithaca Holdings, recently in the news from the Justin Bieber scandals that happened. Manuel Bronstein, chief product officer of Roblox. Julian Castro, the former Secretary of U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Ted Cruz, senator from Texas. Adam D'Angelo, we already mentioned. Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the U.S. Army. Tim Ferriss, the author of The 4-Hour Workweek. Fuck you, Tim. The sellout. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the actor. Sam Harris, the podcast host. No wonder no one believes a fucking word he says. Sam Harris is in the club. Reid Hoffman, who we already mentioned. Ezra Klein, opinion columnist for the New York Times, founder and former editor-in-chief of Vox, go figure. Henry Kravis, we already mentioned. Oh, Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is in this club. They're all in this club. So you can assume that Zionism is probably quite well represented here. You can assume that the Silicon Valley gay tech mafia is obviously very well represented here, being founded by Peter Thiel. We're seeing government quite well represented here, the most corrupt of the bunch. We're seeing not necessarily secret societies, but think tanks, extremely well represented here. Another one, Leonard Leo, former executive vice president of the Federalist Society. Joe Lonsdale. Lisa Monaco, former deputy attorney general in U.S. Department of Justice. Elon Musk, founder and CEO of SpaceX, co-founder and CEO of Tesla Motors. Elon Musk, attending Dialogue Society 2026. I mean, he never did apparently get to visit the island, so he's got to go have some fun where he can. We got Steven Pinker, we got Robert Rubin, we got Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google and Alphabet. We've got Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard University, former secretary of the U.S. Treasury, extremely good friend of Jeffrey Epstein, though he tried to cover it up. And then I just thought it was interesting that Siobhan Zill is the director of Neuralink, and Elon Musk's baby mama is also attending. I thought that this list included Tulsi Gabbard. Did I just miss Tulsi Gabbard on this one? No. Tulsi Gabbard comes up in other places. We'll find Tulsi Gabbard. So that is the original leak on Blue Sky and the list published by Maya Krimu. But then I wanted to know, is there anything else out there on the internet about this Dialogue Society? Went digging and dug up a number of articles, maybe a handful, maybe 4 or 5, from across the years that add a little bit of context here. Just a little bit of context. We mentioned earlier how this math guy published his invitation to his own blog a couple years ago in 2022. And his invitation, similar to the one sent to Jeffrey Epstein, includes a partial list of dialogue participants for that year. And I just grabbed a couple of standout names, including Tulsi Gabbard, who we all know and have mixed feelings about. And I just also thought I would note that Johnny Moore shows up on here, founder and CEO of the Kairos Company. If you're up and in this whole Charlie Kirk investigation, you know some stuff about Johnny Moore. He's attending the Dialogue Society too, which I thought was interesting. Then there's this really weird article, saga thing going on here, where Dialogue Society is apparently not just doing secret society standard shit, where they